The 2024 Game Award nominations were announced yesterday for Game of the Year, and people are salty. A lot of people wondering why in the world their game didn't make it to the top. There's a lot of discussion around DLCs, remakes, and remasters, as well as people just being mad that their game didn't get put up. So, with all of that being said, I want to talk about this. I found an article that breaks it down fairly well. Most of the time, comic book resources, I kind of disagree with a lot of what they say, but here it seems they're just reporting. So, with that being said, let's check this out. All right, over here on Comic Book Resources, the Game Fans say, got snubbed for Game Awards. GOTY nominations. Good Lord, I apologize for all the ads. I just don't pay for this website. This year's Game Awards nominations for Game of the Year have been announced, and it's quite a mixed bag. Astrobot, Balatro, Black Myth Wukong, Elden Ring, Shadow of the Erd Tree. This one here is one that I would disagree with, simply because it's a DLC or an expansion, whatever you want to call it, but Elden Ring came out years ago. This is just an expansion to that game, but we'll get into that discussion later. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth and Metaphor ReFantazio have all earned the honor of being nominated for this year's Game of the Year. While all of these games are well deserving of the nomination, some players feel their personal favorite has been snubbed. Yes, because everybody feels like that when their game doesn't make it. With only 6 slots available for nominations, selected by a global jury. We'll talk about that later too, because that is something that I have somewhat of an issue with. Game of the Year is bound to leave some worthy contenders behind. Gamers are already up in arms about this. Despite many of the games receiving other nominations, they still feel they deserve the most coveted award. Games like Silent Hill 2 Remake, The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom, and Stellar Blade. This is interesting too, is even though a lot of these games are definitely in other categories, a lot of people feel that they should be Game of the Year. For instance, one of my favorite games that I played this year wasn't even put up at all, and that was Palworld. Palworld, did I say Palworld got snubbed? No, I didn't even think it was going to make nomination. I really like Palworld. I think it's a great game. I love it. I played a lot of it, played like 200 hours worth of Palworld. It's a great game in my personal opinion, but it didn't make it, but that's okay. And you know why that's okay? Because I like it and everybody else doesn't have to. But moving on, those are just a few titles that are being, just a few titles being thrown around already as having been snubbed in the nomination process. With games like Echoes of Wisdom and Silent Hill 2 Remake not receiving nominations for Game of the Year, there are lots of angry players online already making their case for why this is wrong. Silent Hill 2 received major critical and commercial success, being praised as an example of what a remake should be. It honored the original while improving upon it, making it a great experience for original and new fans. Echoes of Wisdom surprised many Zelda fans, initially looking to be a silly spin-off and instead offering an experience that can be held in the same regard as its counterparts. Okay, while both of these games surely deserve their praise and would have been solid nominations, it would have just resulted in the same issues. Players would have been upset that, say, Black Myth Wukong, which I did not think they were going to nominate. I and many others have been talking about this. We were 1,000% sure there was no way they were going to nominate Black Myth Wukong for Game of the Year. Not with all of the media attacks that happened on it. Let's be clear here. And here's what I thought. I thought Black Myth Wukong getting nominated for Game of the Year, at least being nominated and not being kept out by the media blackout, similar to how like Hogwarts Legacy was. Now, don't get me wrong, I did not like Hogwarts Legacy. That game is definitely not for me, but it sold very well. It was reviewed very well, and they kept it out for political reasons, which is absolute BS. I thought the same thing was going to happen here with Black Myth Wukong, and it didn't. This was surprising. I thought that a lot of the gaming community would come together and be like, wow, Black Myth Wukong got nominated, but instead, people are getting salty. Okay. A game that's been receiving a Game of the Year buzz since its release was more deserving of the nomination than one of these other games. Stellar Blade is another big title being thrown around as a victim of snubbing. Although, just like Silent Hill 2 and Echoes of Wisdom, it's not without other nominations. Yeah, it's getting action game of the year. It's in that nomination, which I hope it gets beat out by Space Marines 2. Because in the words of, I believe it was Socrates, he said, bros before hoes. So, Space Marines. I hope Space Marines takes it and Stellar Blade does not. Just, I think it was Socrates that said. Might have been George Washington. Anyway, I digress. Many of the games that players feel have been snubbed received countless other nominations. Stellar Blade received nominations for the best score and music and best action game. And I will say this, I've not played a lot of the games this year that have come out. Best score and music, I really do hope when it comes to best score and music, I'm an audiophile. If it sounds really good, it should take it. And best action game, again, that should go to Space Marines 2, because like I said, from Abraham Lincoln, it was bros before hoes. Anyway, while Silent Hill 2 earned a total of 5 nominations, yeah, so that game is, people like it a lot and thought it could be nominated in a bunch. You would think that a total of 5 nominations, it would get it, hey, maybe we should consider this game of the year, right? Players are already pointing out that a DLC was nominated over their favorite game. This is kind of the contentious point here, right? Why are we caring about why are DLCs getting nominated? That is a strange turn of events, in my personal opinion. Given that the award is Game of the Year and not DLC of the Year. Now, see, and they could have a category for that, but it's weird. It's just odd and strange and all of those things. There are already waves of complaints over Shadow of the Erdtree receiving a nomination. Shadow of the Erdtree, not Erdtree, don't know, is such a vast DLC, it's considered by many to be its own separate game, but it's not. It is not. Ultimately, however, it is a DLC. There are no rules specifically stating that a DLC cannot be nominated. Okay, of course, but considering this is the first time the Game Awards' 9-year history that a DLC has been nominated for the accolade, players have been caught off guard. So it's just going against tradition and it's not going against the actual rules, which I find very interesting. However, let's talk about this. So I was completely taken off guard by the Game of the Year nominations. And for those of you who don't know, the Game of the Year nominations are Astrobot, Balatro, Black Myth Wukong, Elden Ring, Shadow of the Erdtree, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, and Metaphor ReFantazio. Based off of what I know from all of these games, because these are games that I have not yet played, I am hoping to pick up Metaphor ReFantazio for my birthday, because I've heard great things about it and it sounds right up my alley. But it does seem interesting that we're allowing DLCs, remakes, and remasters. Now, as far as the remake conversation is concerned, I remember sitting in my buddy's room with him while he was playing Final Fantasy VII back in the day, and that game was long. And I remember how it looked, I remember how it all acted. To see what they did with Rebirth, holy crap. I absolutely think that bringing that to a new generation of people in the high graphical fidelity with everything that they did to it, I would say that is definitely a good choice to me up there. Astrobot and Black Myth Wukong, since those have come out, have been talked about being Game of the Year for sure. I legitimately thought Black Myth Wukong was going to be snubbed and kept out, while they were going to put Dragon Age the Veilguard up there, which would have just been a travesty. That only got 1 nomination, and that was for accessibility features. So for people who are disabled with visual and sound impairments, apparently they're in that vote, which my buddy and I have a theory that because EA is kind of a big sponsor of the Game Awards, they kind of put Dragon Age the Veilguard in at least one category to say, CEA, we still put it there. Please give us your money. But that's our own personal theory. I wouldn't say, I would believe that something like that would happen. But again, I was completely surprised to see Black Myth Wukong hit here, especially all the media hit pieces and everything that was going on around that game. It seemed like people rallied behind that game to play it simply because of the IGN article that bashed it. And my good Lord, was it terrible. Two of the games that did not get nominated this year that I just kind of laugh at are Dragon Age the Veilguard and Stellar Blade. Although I have heard that Dragon Age the Veilguard has absolutely no redeeming qualities as a game, and Stellar Blade is at least a mid-tier action game. I haven't really heard anything else about Stellar Blade that would tell me that it's game of the year. In fact, the only thing that I've heard about Stellar Blade is that the girl's butt hangs out and the girl's boobs hang out. Like, it's got some TNA in it. And I'm just like, is that really like game of the year? I've never heard about how great the story is. I've never heard about how solid the mechanics are. Literally the only thing I've heard about from Stellar Blade is how the girl in it is apparently hot. And I'm like, that could be for the hub, video of the year maybe, and for the hub, you guys know what I'm talking about. But for Game Awards, come on, guys, up your standards a little bit. And I just think it's hilarious. I love that. I will say this. I love that neither of those games got selected, because one was absolute hot garbage and one was touted as a great game simply because of sex appeal. And that's just not enough. Again, the Game Awards this year are kind of surprising in the aspect of the games that got voted to be Game of the Year, but they're also a little bit concerning because they have a global panel. And this global panel is made up of journalists and industry professionals all over the globe that have a distinct lack of just regular gamers, regular players. And apparently you can vote online as a gamer, but what's weird to me is it's only 10% of the vote. So gamers all over the world are only going to be considered 10% of the vote. What would have been more interesting to me is if the company had gone out and done some reputable searching and found people who play games and said, hey, we would like to select you for the 2024 Game Awards nomination process. So you, as a gamer, can have your voice heard as well, and just selected random gamers throughout the globe. That would have been very, very hard to police. I understand that. There's a lot of issues with that, but it just seems like, yet again, they're doing that thing where they want to keep gamers out of gaming and make sure that journalists are heard. Even though I think the games up for Game of the Year right now absolutely deserve it. From everybody that I've followed, I've watched some playthroughs from several of these games, and they look absolutely fantastic. And if I had the money, I'd already have them. But again, these are all pretty expensive games, with the exception of Balatro. In fact, Balatro I hadn't heard of, but from what I am to understand is that Balatro is that game that will absolutely replace the rest of your life if you start to play it. I can't do that. I got too much stuff to do. This is really, really interesting this year with everything going on. We are having the correct conversation about the global nomination process, about the global jury or whatever they call it. We are not, however, having the correct conversation about what games got nominated. I understand that a lot of people, their favorite games don't get nominated, and I just think it's kind of funny, guys. Even if they get nominated for other categories, people get so hurt when their game doesn't get to Game of the Year. And I don't understand why we're getting our fifis up in a bunch over a video game that we liked not getting picked by journalists. I was under the impression we thought the journalists were dumb. So why would you get your knickers in a twist over how the journalists vote? You sit there and poke fun at them and laugh at them online and tell them how dumb they are online, because many of them are. But when they don't pick your favorite game for Game of the Year, which you should already know is run by journalists, you get all up in a tizzy. Stop your tizzy. No. Enjoy the fact that one of the games that we thought was going to get kept off of the Game of the Year list, Black Myth Wukong, actually got on there. I don't think it's going to win. I think Astrobot and Metaphor Refantasio, based off of what I heard, have a really good chance of taking it. Who knows? Maybe Elden Ring, Shadow of the Erd Tree, which shouldn't be there because it's a DLC. Although it's not in violation of the rules, it still feels weird. But maybe that one will take it. That being said, there are things to celebrate here. There are conversations to have. And as I said before, thank God Stellar Blade didn't get nominated for Game of the Year. Bros before hoes. That's how it goes. And as always, until next time, thanks for watching. Cheers, everybody.